Part two of part one of my testimony is how I get through trials, and part two, which is only part one bit, is about obedience. We're talking about sacrifice before, and that's putting to death old things, worldly desires, your flesh, and all the things that come with that. Selfishness, jealousy, division, pride, stuff like that. And I was talking about, I was doing a masterclass with Frank Viola, which was about, how to survive trials, and he actually had a book on this called Hang On, Let Go, which I read afterwards. It was actually when you face like a real disaster in your life, like an absolute life-shattering moment. And I'm on my third copy because I keep giving that book away to people I think who need it. And that really helped me. So one thing Frank warned us about in that masterclass about getting through a trial was not to leave the desert, and that is your place of isolation. Usually when you go through a trial, God will isolate you physically. Sometimes it's more of an emotional, social detachment thing, but sometimes he isolates you physically like he did. I was I was bedridden from COVID for a couple of weeks. I was getting better. And so I said to the Holy Spirit, who repeated what Frank was saying to me, it's okay, I'll behave this time. I won't boast. I won't have pride. I'll avoid playing arcade games when I should be having lunch with people after church. This was a problem. I put gaming before fellowship. God not like that. Particularly when I get so addicted to video games. Particularly, when I'm nostalgic about like playing Sonic the Hedgehog. Two, especially two. Then the Holy Spirit said, if you go back this early, and before you fully heal, you could end up worse. But I didn't listen. I thought my way was better, and after 2 weeks of not being able to go to church, I was back, and I had a second chance to talk to people now. Now I've got another verse here from 2 Corinthians. Chapter 1. Verses 8 to 9. So I read to us, I think it was to 7 last time, to 9. Verse 8. We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and we thought we would never live through it. How long are we doing this for? to 9. In fact, we expected to die as a result. We stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely on God, who raises the dead. Let's just go 10. And he did rescue us from mortal danger, and he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us. So that's the importance of relying on God and not listening to your own understanding, like I did. And so I was still going to trial when I returned to church. I can't remember what I was struggling with, but I wanted to really teach people about the gospel of the kingdom. But I was doing it badly. I wasn't very thorough, and so God got me to keep it to myself. I just wanted people to be as radically changed as I was. I was exposure. I had that fire again. I was motivated to listening to the gospel, actually following Jesus, and that's just a taste of what you can expect when you hear, the gospel of the kingdom message, when it's delivered properly, when a person is actually fully obedient to it. One thing, I think it was the next year, I was like, wondering when I could preach the gospel of the kingdom, I'm not being fully obedient to it, Lord. And he told me that, I need to increase in generosity. And that wasn't out of some obligation, I actually had to learn to be generous, which is what he was able to help me with. So the time I was struggling with being obedient to God, keeping this to myself, there was just this desire, this urging to want to say it, just to preach it, preach the gospel of the kingdom. I wanted to, but something was, just stopping me. And I probably still had the same similar anxieties that I had before I got those symptoms of long COVID, because I got COVID. Actually, no, I didn't get COVID yet. Again, I had it 4 times, but I didn't have it yet. I just crashed from all that anxiety, and I still kind of had that. I still was trying to find ways to talk to people. I was being a little bit more worldly now, and I could talk, but I came up against those same barriers I usually have with my autism, and that is, I guess, being too open and saying things that I can't even tell if they're inappropriate or not. So I was still struggling to obey God, and I suppose that was about just letting go of the world and denying my flesh. So it was only when my pastor, toward the end of the sermon, he was speaking, for the Holy Spirit speak to his heart that God was asking church members to listen to him, I finally decided to then obey him. And this is probably the closest the Holy Spirit anointed me. He has to continually talk through his person just to get me to listen to God and be obedient. But he will eventually have me speak to me through visions and encounters with his own spirit, to either get me to listen or comfort me through all kinds of struggles I've gone through in my walk with Jesus. And the next Tuesday, after he gave his sermon, I actually was invited by people from church to go see, I guess, an acoustic singer. But I ditched them because I really wanted to go see just this band that was playing where our church venue was, and I really wanted to build up my skills as a photographer again, and I felt well enough to do that, and so I just chose any band to see after church, and I wasn't going to stay too long, but I actually couldn't get through the cover band, and I was only taking photos on the mobile phone. Anyway, I ditched them, and then on Tuesday I developed COVID symptoms for the 5th time, and that turned to worse long COVID symptoms than I've ever had. So yet again I was isolated from the church and was feeling that crushing weight of a loneliness. I even became suicidal from it. And sorry for not giving trigger warning, but I'll give a trigger warning here that I do talk about, when I had, the suicidal thoughts, ideations, and even attempts. So if that is a very triggering area for you, you can either skip over that or just not watch. So then the Holy Spirit let me know he wouldn't let me kill myself. And that just felt like a weird thing to do. I was like, why me? Why not anybody else? Sure enough, when I did attempt, I would just become paralyzed and couldn't make any further action. It reminds you of having the whole Psalm 91 protection. Even though I still had not completely submitted to God, I wasn't under God's protection. Being completely obedient wasn't something that happened overnight or even took weeks. But gradually, I would listen and obey God. When I had recovered from just enough long COVID symptoms to go back to church, I listened to when the Holy Spirit told me to avoid going to certain places because of the risk of catching COVID for a 5th time. And 3 weeks before my baptism, which I had anxiety about because I had both a fear of water, because I can't swim. And speaking in front of the church, there was a lot of temptation to go see live bands. The Holy Spirit told me not to go. It was Oz Music Month, November, and some of these bands were some of my favourite, and they were playing around the corner from me. But I called on my Bible study group to pray I'd be given enough of the Lord's strength to resist giving into these temptations. I didn't even feel ready to be baptized, but God was quickening me through the process because of the plans me had in early 2023. And I was not yet called as a prophet yet. But he was slowly revealing to me that I was prophetic. I was able to resist those temptations and get baptized and give my testimony while my anxiety was numbed by these supplements I took. I've only known about after going to an after church lunch. So I really felt like that was God doing that. Show me them. They're very expensive and I don't take them anymore, but that was the one way I could deal with my anxiety. Although I did have a panic attack backstage before I took the pills, because I couldn't just take them. Otherwise, if I took them too early, I'd actually be stoned or feel like I was stoned, and I'd just be giggling all throughout my testimony, and that gave me even more anxiety. So yeah, but I was able to deliver it, and I got a lot of people afterwards at a Christmas party, coming up to me, talking to me about it, and a lot of the people I got to know well, and that was the first meeting, so that was good. So I was learning to be more obedient. I was also being given all these prophecies about the church, but had to keep them to myself until April-May 2023, the year later. That was a good test of obedience for me. Let me just pause and say that I had been a communist since the age of 16. I have this form of autism called pathological demand avoidance syndrome, which makes me both aggressively and passively resistant to following orders. So like I was born with a spirit of rebellion, which I've since learned from other people on YouTube, other sort of prophetic videos, is witchcraft. I don't know exactly how that is, but it's the last thing I'm going to be doing. We can curse people with our words. If you sow seeds of doubt in people by denying their spiritual gifts or what God has called them to be, if you discourage them because you can't see the potential God has placed in them, which most of the time those people are even seeing the opposite. They see the potential, feel threatened by it, and use those word curses to chip away at the confidence of their own abilities, like your own abilities, say if they were doing it to you. It's gaslighting. Any negative word spoken over you is witchcraft. And it invites the spirit of offense, rejection, despair to just begin to oppress you. They are false garments of heaviness. They are false garments or mantles that Satan puts on you. If you heard the song that goes, "Take off the garment of heaviness and put on the garments of praise" by Robert Mark, that is one way you can overcome these spirits, by actually praying to God to remove the garment of heaviness and put on a garment of praise. I would say remove the garment of despair and put on a garment of peace and joy. I do that for people that I pray for them for their depression to heal. Because depression is a spirit too, which I didn't believe when I was 13 years old, when my church sort of tried to pray the spirit of depression off me. But actually, it did work. When I was 14, I just became more and more motivated in my faith. And I even joined the youth group, which I was avoiding for a long time. Well, I sat with them in our night church services, which I hadn't done. So yeah, even a rebellious child, unbelief, can still bring healing. So, continuing, the Holy Spirit had dealt with me heavily about my rebellion. He started by revealing to me that I wasn't respecting the leaders in the church. But what he was really doing was helping me be more obedient to God. God could not use me if I was rebellious towards him, particularly the calling that I had on me. So over time, this rebellious mindset, or let's call it a stronghold, broke off me. And I was an extreme example of being rebellious. I was rebellious towards my own government. I was a step away from joining in on anti-fire activities. And actually, there was actually a time when I actually longed to meet just people who were involved in that stuff. I'd be encouraged by their posters around, my suburb, or even around the whole city. We are commanded to respect the law of the land unless it goes against the written word. I was irritable towards my parents, my own siblings, teachers, and other adults. I felt that my way was the best way, particularly when I was in my 20s. I felt like these people weren't smart enough to know what was best for me. I was full of a lot of pride. After growing up and having people think I was inferior because of my supposed lack of intelligence, when I realized my potential and pursued knowledge, I started to feel the same way about them. That's all left in the past. I was what do they call it? I was developmentally delayed. I was a remedial class kid. I had a lot of discouragement in my life rather than the encouragement of my own skills. And so when I was diagnosed with autism in my early 20s, or I found out I had autism in my early 20s, I realised that I did have potential, and I literally just started teaching myself things, which is what people with autism are very good at. Anyway, I won't talk too much about that. That's just to show you some of my struggles with being obedient to God. And to tell you the truth, it took a long time to just accept that God wanted to take me out of the live music scene to not play video games, which nobody understood. Not people in my family or even the leaders of my church. So I sympathize with you when you struggle to listen to God. Our flesh thinks we know better than God, and we're not ready to hand over our own understanding of things and our abilities to problem solve to Him. And I can really just hear, Satan in our flesh saying that you know better than God, which is the first deception. He told to Adam and Eve, which led to sin coming into the world and our world being broken by sin, and us having to deal with our flesh and all those things it gets us to do, and those spirits it invites in. Also, the more gifted we are, the harder it is to give control over to God over our lives. As a fellow gifted person who had a real knack to problem solve, let me just say it is impossible. I remember when I struggled, I kept problem solving. Even when I was praying to God for Him to take me out of a situation, or praying for a solution, I would still problem solve in my prayers. And then over time, I learned to just let go of that. Just say, no, I'm not going to problem solve, though I am good at it. I'm not going to look for 2 or 3 different solutions. I'm just going to pray to God and let Him come up with the solution. So it's a very gradual process for us. But if you just give a little bit to God and release that control you want to have over your own situation, the easier it becomes. And in this part 2, the actual part 2, not this one, it's about a humbling trial, and it's you just hand a little bit of that pride over to God at a time, and I'll get more into that hopefully when I start talking about that. It can still be a struggle for me, but reading the Word often reminds me that God knows more than me and has the power to bring a solution to my life better than I can ever conceive. And I remember when He started answering prayer for me in ways I could never fathom. It's why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think that God was going to do that? And it's just I realized that I just did not know. I do not have that mental capacity to actually see things from God's perspective. And none of us do. Particularly if we're in an impossible situation and we just, fall into depression and despair, and we just think that, nothing's going to get us out of this. God has the power to do that. And He's smarter than us. Because He created intelligence. Last year at this time, the Asbury revival had ended, and both the people who experienced that and for me, who just watched their live stream and worshipped along to the songs they sang, I had an accelerated and permanent transformation. Because I didn't want the powerful presence of God to leave me, I kept going for another 4 months, which led to more transformation. Also, this was a time when a fire fell on me. It was a Troy Black prophecy, which I heard 3 months after this fire fell on me. It was like the glory of God came to rest on me, and so I could take the Holy Spirit with me anywhere. I didn't just have to, go to the secret place or go to corporate worship in a church. It was anywhere, a supermarket. So yeah, it led to more transformation. I was learning more about the Word, for now being able to attend my church and fellowship with my church family. And this kind of sounds like a bit of a honeymoon period for me. Everything, going smoothly. Of course, people just said they were happy for all the changes I was going through, but weren't interested in experiencing them for themselves. So I had no one to share it with. Then the prophecies of their own revival given to me. I got so excited of finally being able to share the experiences with them. It took many months of waiting, and they never did have an Asbury type of revival, but they did have a revival of the heart, and the Spirit came to dwell with them and pour out on them. So, when I finally did leave, I felt like I accomplished something. There was a lot of prayer, fasting, prophetic decrees, and declarations. And then I spent, the last 5 months releasing the glory into the church, which I never stopped talking about. So that's obedience and sacrifice. I do feel like the biggest sacrifice I had to make was sacrificing friends and eventually my desire to be part of that church family. That gets onto a whole new subject, which I'll talk a little more about in part 4. So I'm going to end this here, and I will move on to part 2 when I can find it. Okay. That's it. Alright, part 2 is coming up.